Hey everyone, it's Louisa from Feel Good Astrology, and I'm really delighted because today I've got a feel good conversation with somebody I've really been wanting to speak to ever since I first heard an interview between her and Richie Allen, and also heard about her through a mutual friend. So I have done a little bit of digging about our guest, and so let me share a little bit of information about her, because often the people I have on the show often seem a little bit anti-establishment, I have to say, because it's possibly because I'm a little bit, one way of mainstream. But today I've actually got somebody who was a nurse and also a registered nurse. I'm going to read a little bit of information about my guest. So she's a nurse, Integrative Health practitioner. She's also a truth seeker, connector, and I love this, demystifier of health and science. So we're talking about somebody who has got quite a few qualifications. So a Bachelor of Science in Nursing and is a registered nurse, an MA in Medical Ethics and Law, a diploma in naturopathic nutritional therapy, and also a postgrad in high dependency in intensive care nursing. So this is somebody who has worked with patients for years and years and years, and who has now come to a new kind of understanding of health, not just from the big pharma position. So, when I heard about my guest, whose name is Jennie, and I'll introduce you in just a second, I was really, really keen to interview her. Anyway, cut through another month, and here we are. We have a slightly delayed start time because of internet difficulties, and Mercury is just about to go direct again within the next hour. So hence all my tongue-tiedness and whatnot. But hopefully this interview will be well worth the wait. So let me bring on my guest right now. Let's bring in Jennie now. Hey,
Hello.
Jennie.
Hello.
Thank you so much for being really patient today, because obviously we've had a few delays, of over an hour and a half. So I really appreciate your patience and your flexibility in joining us a little bit later. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you very much. I think the weather's been really nice the last couple of weeks. It's been very sunny. It's been good. But I'm good, apart from all the things that are going on externally around us that we can't really control right now. But I'm really good. Thank you.
And it's great. I can already see we've got some people watching live, so that's great. So hello to you guys that are watching. I'm going to open up the chat room, so if you want to comment, if you want to send in a question, please do. You're happy with questions as they come up, Jennie?
Yeah.
Excellent. And also just let us know who you are if you're watching, and where you're sat right now, so we can welcome you. And also so we can tailor the conversation a little bit to your needs. So today's title is The Rain Barrel Effect. And so this is something that Jennie wants to share with us. Is it like a metaphor for health, Jennie, would you say?
Yes, okay. It is, absolutely. Yeah.
So hopefully we'll be able to understand health from a very sort of like practical position. Before we talk about the rain barrel effect, how can I just find out a little bit more? Because obviously I just gave you a little potted description of you. I want to find out how it was that you came to question what was going on with the training that you'd had, because obviously 20 years of experience is quite a long way down a particular path. What was it that made you question and look outside of the medical model?
Well, it was my own experiences really, and also seeing experiences with family and friends, and then also having the real life clinical experience that I had when I worked in the hospital. So I did my nurse training in 1996. Before that, I'd worked in a nursing home as a carer. So from the age of 16, I'd been really in care. Wow. And I always wanted to be a nurse. So from a very young age, I used to say to my mum, I wanted to be a nurse, and I used to avoid the cartoons, and I'd be watching programs about people giving birth and stuff like that. So I always had an interest in being a nurse. I was very lucky that I knew which direction I wanted to go in. So at 18, I started my nurse training. I did a degree in nursing at the University of Hertfordshire, which actually was excellent training because it was very much clinical based, and it was a very humanistic course. They did a lot about communication and about building relationships, and that side of things was very good. But when I look back at it now and I look at how much teaching we had on like the spiritual side or about nutrition, the importance of nutrition, we actually had very little. We had much more to do with pharma. And that's quite reflected in modern medicine training, is that they hardly have any. They probably have like one session on nutrition, doctors, and they have most of their focus is on pharma, so on pharmaceutical methods of healing, really. Except what I've learned is that pharmaceutical methods aren't healing, they're just suppressing a symptom of a disease, So my clinical background was I did colorectal surgery and vascular for a year, and then I went into high dependency and intensive care. And before I left, I was working in a team called Outreach, which would go to the wards and help support the nurses when they've got patients that were acutely unwell and that were deteriorating. And we'd be that like key liaison between the patients on the wards and intensive care. So it was an amazing job. I really, really loved that job. But actually what we saw a lot of during that work was we saw a lot of mismanagement of patients. So we'd be called to see somebody, not always, but we'd be called to see somebody and assess somebody from an intensive care perspective. And when you looked through like the history of the notes, you could see like where things had gone wrong or not been recognised and how that had contributed to the patient's deterioration. So we did a lot of that. And at the same time, I was an advanced life support instructor, and I did my master's in medical ethics and law. I was really interested in the ethical side of things. And I also sat on a research ethics committee as well. So my background kind of gave me the tools to be able to look at the perspective I'm looking from now. And then I left 10 years ago to move to Portugal, and I worked as a private nurse for a little while. And then I fell into nurse recruitment. It was a bit of an accident, really. And I was recruiting nurses for the NHS. But what my role was in that job was not just to recruit, but also to help prepare them for working in the NHS. And getting them up to scratch on like the policies and procedures that they might be working under and things like that. So I had several wonderful years of traveling all over the world. And then with the pandemic, everything kind of had already started to go down, and nurses weren't traveling or being interviewed. And I'd already started to look at, I'd already done my nutrition course, and then I decided to do my integrative health course, which is where this rain barrel effect kind of theory comes from. And the reason why I really started looking at nutrition was because I was having my own quite serious health challenges that weren't being addressed properly by the modern medical way. And I knew that if I carried on that route, I was just going to be more harmed. And what I needed to do was stop and understand physiologically what was going on with me, and also spiritually and psychologically, and look at things in a different perspective. So every time I've gone along, like if a friend says to me, oh, this is bothering me at the moment, what do you think this is? If I don't know, I'll go and look, and I'll deep dive and research into it. So everything that's kind of cropped up, I've looked at, and then I've tried to back up with a qualification just so I know that I'm getting the right information, because there is so much information out there. And it's so confusing for people to understand which diet is best or which route they go down in terms of healing. So my services now are to help people understand where things go wrong, and to help them understand how to improve those things, and then also give them tools in the future to be able to be empowered about their own health. And I think that's really important, because from birth, one of our first contacts is with the doctor. And when we're ever sick, we're taken to a doctor to help us. But we all have an innate ability to heal ourselves. And that's what I think modern medicine fails to tell us. You know, like most diseases are preventable and treatable. Maybe some diseases aren't curable, but you can look at the underlying root cause. And I think that's where medicine has gone in one direction, is that they don't necessarily look at the underlying root cause, like at a base level, which could be something really simple. It could be, so for example, it could be a B vitamin deficiency, but they're treating the symptoms of the B vitamin deficiency, but they aren't treating the deficiency or the cause of the deficiency in the first place. So it's all about trying to help people unpick where their health and healing lies, really. So yeah, so that's my story. I've got a
Wow.
fur.
That's great. Don't worry, it's fly season in Portugal, isn't it? Because we're actually only a few towns away from each other, aren't we?
Yes, we are.
And if I'd have my window open, I'd have flies in here as well. So I'm curious, like you said, you know, like modern doctoring or medicine doesn't really look at the original cause, you know, it just like treats the symptoms. And you also mentioned that there wasn't much nutritional training or you know, anything that might be deemed alternative. What do you put that down to? Why do you think? Because like you'd think that an area that like a science or a way of thinking would want to be the absolute best it could be. Why would something as big as medicine just kind of ignore a whole part of evolution or diet or, you know, something really big? I mean, it seems like a glaring error to me. I'm just wondering where that comes from.
Well, I mean, I think if you look back at the history of modern medicine and how things have evolved, and particularly look back to the early 1900s, where there were a lot of alternative practitioners around and doctors that worked, they were healers, really. Medicine was an art and they were healers. And then medicine became much more a science, and they kind of forgot the art a little bit of medicine.
Right.
And, you know, you go back to Hippocrates, and Hippocrates said, let food be thy medicine and medicine be thy food. And, you know, they knew, the ancient civilizations knew that our environment that we put our bodies under, whether that's internal things going on internally, stresses internally, or external environmental stresses, they knew that has a massive impact on health. So say, for example, now at the moment, you go to the doctors and you get a 10-minute appointment, and the doctor looks at your numbers and he says, you've got a high cholesterol. This is a dangerous level. You're at risk of cardiovascular disease and stroke. So you need to take this statin. And they're very well researched that they'll reduce your numbers, and they're looking at the numbers. They're not looking at the person. And
of course,
also
they go through the roof if they say that, aren't they?
Exactly. Well, there's definitely something called white coat hypertension, where people go to the doctors and their blood pressure already rises just because they're in the doctors, you know. But you only get a very short amount of time. So the doctors are looking for the quickest solution that they can give that patient to walk away from there thinking that they've had something positive done for their health. But statins are one of the drugs that can cause a whole heap of problems for people, including like a real assault on your mitochondrial health, which is your powerhouse of your cells. And that's where a lot of chronic fatigue comes from, is that your mitochondrial health is not functioning very well. So there's like a stopgap thing, really. And also I think with training is that doctors are very much geared up to hospital medicine. And so we're very much taught, although we did have some primary care medicine, like with the GPs and things, and preventative care, we did have some of that during our training. A lot of it is focused on the patient in the hospital. Well, by the time the patients got into the hospital, it's too late, really, because there was probably things that you could already undo before they arrived in hospital. And I'm not saying that hospitals don't do amazing work, because they do some amazing life-saving work, and you know, that's what we have here as a system. But again, looking back, so if you look back to the Rockefeller Foundation and what stemmed from that was that they really controlled a lot of the medical education and nursing education through the last 100 years. So doctors and nurses believe that they're getting the best, most up-to-date training, but actually it's being directed really by the people that teach the medicine, but that also have the profits in the pharmaceutical industry. And we see that a bit now. What's happening with COVID-19 is that from any of the experts that have been picked to choose, or from the governments, or from even the regulatory and the health bodies, and it's really shocked me how poor the advice that's come out, is that all they're talking about is the vaccine. So all they're looking at is pure germ theory. They're not looking at terrain, which, you know, there's a bit of both there, that you have to make sure that your terrain is in the right conditions to be able to fight something like a virus that you haven't come across before, you know. And, you know, they haven't talked about vitamin D, they haven't talked about vitamin C, they haven't talked about the importance of fear and how that affects your body, and the importance of reducing your sympathetic drive, which is how we all live, right? So, and also what the Rockefeller Foundation did was they took on a real assault on naturopaths and alternative practitioners, and it started. Lots of things were called quackery. Lots of things were discredited. I mean, people were imprisoned and all sorts of things. And I fear that is happening again now, because lots of people are being deplatformed if they're talking about alternatives and things. So I think what is happening is that we've got a lot of people aware now and looking at medicine and health in a slightly different way. And I'm hoping that side of the alternative side will develop. But really, like everything that is included in the integrative health approach and like the rain barrel concept is that everything is solvable. Like you can change things if you just change the conditions that you're giving your body. You know, one of the biggest lies is that we can't regenerate, and actually we can. Our cells regenerate all the time. Skin cells regenerate within 28 days. Your gut cells can regenerate within 3 or 4 days. Your red blood cells take a bit longer. Your blood cells take longer to regenerate. And your muscle cells, you can't really regenerate. They have a set lifetime. But everything else we can improve. Our nervous system, our gut health, everything. If we give our body the right conditions. And not everybody has the same right conditions. Depends on the person, you know?
Yeah, that's fascinating. It's funny. I mean, obviously, what you're talking about is integrative health. You know, with everything coming together. I mean, that was one of my questions I was going to ask about, because, you know, I've got some friends who work in medicine, and I also know lots and lots of practitioners who would be considered alternative or healers. And what always strikes me is that people they choose a specialty when they go into medicine, you know, and they tend to go down one route. And if the cause of our symptoms crosses a few different specialties, you're not necessarily going to get a full picture. And what I'm really fascinated by is, you know, whether, like, when medicine will start working with some of the alternative fields, because everybody's seeing things through different lenses. And surely the biggest picture is the one that's going to have the most amount of information. And obviously from then you can draw it down and get closer. And presumably that's what you're doing, you know, integrating as much as you can, as much data as you can.
Yeah, so integrative health, I did my training through someone called Dr. Stephen Cabral, and he's a naturopath and he's got a huge amount of experience, but he also had his own health challenges too. So he's like lived it as well. So he knows the changes personally that you can make that can make huge improvements in your health. Yeah. And there's like 7 modalities of integrative health, and it covers Ayurvedic medicine, and they were very smart. They knew about epigenetics. Yeah. 3,000 years before the science proved it. They knew that. It covers Chinese medicine. It covers naturopathy. It covers orthomolecular medicine, which is about using different minerals and vitamins in higher doses to give different effects. Yeah. It also covers functional medicine, which looks at lab work, because you can do so many lab tests now, which can help you really pinpoint what the root cause of the illness is. Yeah. But most of those aren't available on the NHS or from your doctor. You'd have to order them privately, and then you'd have somebody that could interpret them. So it covers a lot of different modalities. It doesn't just look at one. And like you say, it doesn't just look at one organ or one system. It's a multi-system, holistic approach. And what I like about the integrative health is it looks at physical things, but it also considers psychological issues, emotional issues, spiritual balance as well. Because like I said, I don't think you can do one without the other. You could eat a really good diet. You could be exercising really well. But if your underlying digestive system isn't functioning properly, or you've got huge levels of stress that you aren't managing, you're not going to do very much with just diet and exercise alone. You're still going to have issues that crop up. So it's such a minefield, health, I think, because like we've already mentioned, there are so many different ways that you can go down. There's so many different diets. There's so many different supplements. And you hear people saying, try this, try this, try this, try this all the time. I mean, if anybody ever posts anything on social media, they get 100 suggestions of different things that they could try.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, you could start taking oregano oil, but it might not be, the cure to all of your problems. Do you know what I mean? It's very, and the key, the skill of a practitioner is understanding the person and also understanding how everything fits in with their health. Because what?
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, of course, not many people would actually understand their clients. When I think about my doctors that I've had over the years in the UK, they didn't really know anything about me. And I've had a homeopathic doctor for about 10 years who knows pretty much as anybody knows about me. He knows about my mum's history, my dad's history, my grandparents' history. He knows about my children. And my husband, he's got a very, very broad picture. And I really like that. I should, just before we go further, just include my husband, actually, because he's saying hello. And he's saying, yes, Jenny. I can't remember exactly which comment that was too. But he also says that's true. Holistic health, only as good as your weakest link. And also, he also says, and I'm sure it's not his own made up saying, but he says, better to pay the chef than the doctor. Which I really like. I think that's kind of true. So, so I don't suppose many doctors do really know their patients that well, only if they're given the chance to.
Yeah, well, absolutely. And the pressure of when, say, if you've got a patient in hospital, for the hospital doctors, you're working under an acute environment where patients change all the time and the turnover is really fast. And it's very difficult to get to know your patients in that scenario. And really all they're dealing with is the acute problem that's in front of them. And then, the treatments that they're given may also give more problems. So when the hospital discharges somebody, those hospital doctors don't often see that patient again. So they don't really know in the end what their morbidity is post-discharge. GPs are a little bit different. But again, like when I was younger, I remember our GP was the same, and he was the same for many, many years. And he would come and do house visits. We would see them. But now people can't even get face-to-face appointments with a doctor at the moment, especially in the UK. It's very difficult. People are having video consultations, which is fine to a point. But you really need to get your hands on a patient to really understand what's going on. I read something really interesting the other day, actually, which was about healing hands. And it was about someone that had done a piece of research about the ability of doctors and did they have healing capabilities like in their hands. And she went to all these doctors and she taught them about the importance of healing and energy and everything. And a lot of them felt that they didn't have that skill. So what she did was she tested them in different scenarios, and they just used their hands and their observational skills to diagnose what they thought was wrong with the patient. So they didn't have, blood pressure machines and blood tests and x-rays and all that kind of thing. They just had their own perception. And actually something like 92% of the doctors were able to zone in on the problem just by using observation and touch. But that's been removed now from modern medicine. They don't really function like that anymore. It's sad, really, because it really has been sterilized in a way.
Yeah. And it's the kind of wisdom that your grandma might have, like a grandmother who has scooped up all her grandchildren and cuddled them and felt them and sensed when something's not quite right. And also I think, if we're pattern and meaning making people, aren't we? Like machines, that's what we do. We see patterns. And so presumably if a GP has seen hundreds of patients and about viral things, they may well have noticed a similarity in the person's eyes or just something about their energy, and they might not have like rationally noticed that, but at some level, at an unconscious level, the pattern would have gone in. That's a fascinating subject and study. So do you want to tell us about the rain barrel effect then, and why we need to know about it?
Well, the rain barrel effect is just kind of like, it's a way of describing what happens to our body. So if you imagine the rain barrel is collecting the water off the roof, the rainwater off the roof. And if we imagine that rainwater is our toxic environment, or the toxins that we have around our environment, and they could be heavy metals, GMO food, the chemicals that are in food. It could be pesticides. It could be from the water that we drink. It could be from external stresses. Could be from the gut. Could be that you've got a sick home, like you have mold in the home. Could be to do with, it could be electrosmog that we're surrounded in now. It could be also from pharmaceutical medicine, and it could also be from our gut health. So if we imagine that the rain barrel's constantly filling up, at some point it's going to get to the point where it's completely full, and then it's going to start overfilling. And once it starts overfilling, it's going to cause damage to the structure of the rain barrel. It's going to make the ground outside all wet and soggy, and it's not going to be functioning very well. So the idea is that with eating well, detoxifying, with practicing spirituality and other things, you can reduce that load of all those toxins going in, and you can empty it when you do a detoxification. So it's about identifying what are the main factors in a person. And just from experience, personal experience, but also from clinical experience, most problems come from stress, and either external perceived stress or from internal stress. And that's where most problems start. And there's a saying when we talk about epigenetics, which I can talk about a little bit in a minute, is that your genetics load the gun, but your environment pulls the trigger. And usually that trigger is pulled when there's an event. And that event could be something like a bereavement, or it could be a car accident, or a fall and an injury, or any event that just tips you over the edge. And that's what I can normally see in patients. You have people that are healthy, or they feel healthy. And then maybe they get, I don't know, a throat infection, and they have antibiotics. And then after the antibiotics, then they get thrush, and then they have treatment for thrush, and then they have treatment for something else. And it's just like a snowball effect, really. So that's really all the rain barrel effect concept is that if we think of ourselves as a vessel, we have to take care of our vessel and take care of what we put in it, so that we don't damage it more. And by the time there's already cracks showing in the barrel, or that the floor is overloaded, damage is already being done. So we need to try and prevent that, or mitigate the impact that has on somebody.
Well, I imagine actually there are quite a few babies born with quite a bit of rain barrel effect. I remember,
definitely.
I'm trying to think of the presenter's name who did a housing program in the UK. Was it Sarah Beanie?
Yeah.
She is an advocate of sort of like detoxifying things. I'm just kind of trying to remember this, but I'm pretty sure she tested her blood and was really, really shocked at just how many toxins, pesticides and chemicals and stuff there were in there. And of course, the industry she works in is going to be loaded with that, with all the paint fumes and stuff. But our babies are basically in our toxic stew. Sometimes you fly over your I've had that as well, where a fly goes over the camera. It's really funny. And of course, one thing that wasn't mentioned, because we don't often think that our toiletries, our microwaves and things like that, they're all adding to the load as well. And we all do that. Most people, when you go to somebody's house, they've got hormone disrupting fragrance plugins and things like that. All of that also affects it, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And there was, going back to what you said about Sarah Beanie, there was some research done. I think it was 95% of people have traces of DDT in them.
Wow.
Although DDT was banned 40 years ago.
Yeah.
So, and these chemicals don't degrade. And the problem is they say that they're safe, like individually, the chemicals are safe. That's what they say in certain quantities. But what they don't ever look at is the cumulative exposure that we have. And, even down to the fire retardants that they put on sofas or carpets.
Yeah.
And actually, it's quite scary when you first start looking into your home environmental toxins. And it was one of the first things I did when I was starting to learn, is get rid of as much as I could. And I don't have many chemicals in my house now. And the shampoos I use and the deodorants I use, they're all naturally based. And it's funny, I've started to notice that there is more and more of those naturally based products coming into the supermarkets now. I found some fluoride-free toothpaste today in Aldi, which I had never seen before. So they're starting to come through. So toxins definitely, but also they're in our food. It's in the water that we drink. And a little bit difficult not to get a bit freaked out when you start to look at everything.
Yeah.
But what I'd say to people is just try and remove as much as you possibly can. I mean, bicarb, vinegar, lemon never did our grandparents any harm, and they're natural and they actually work pretty well. You know, I think vinegar cleans windows better than any spray.
Windowy, definitely. That's what I use.
But they've capitalized on our convenience.
Definitely. It's funny, when we were still living in the UK, because obviously we've been in Portugal now for 4 years, so not as long as you, but when I was in the UK, one of my closest friends was a GP, or just about to be a retired GP, and my friend had a cancer and had conventional treatment. But that's it's funny, isn't it, how people who have their own healing journey, that's when they get switched on to possibly there's something outside of medicine. You know, this is somebody who had lived and breathed medicine since, you know, being a child, really, a bit like you. And all of a sudden, everything in the house went, including like plastic utensils. All the pans got changed.
Everything.
And it was really, really thorough what she did. And in the end, kind of really struggled with the industry that she'd been, and I say industry quite deliberately. You know, she absolutely loves the fact that, you know, there's life-saving technology. You know, if you need a doctor, you need something in an emergency, definitely. But you know, her whole approach to health and healing has completely changed. And she actually went and studied epigenetics as well. And, you know, we had some very long conversations. In fact, we've actually got a couple of people joining us now also saying, yay, epigenetics. This is Fiona and Simon coming to us from the UK. And they're saying, haha, use vinegar for all sorts, very underrated. Yeah, I mean, since I've met Carl, actually, it was nice to meet a kindred spirit who is like a good 10 years ahead of me. So I haven't really used a microwave for 10 years. We've had 3 babies. We've never needed to use a microwave. We use vinegar. I make my own deodorants and toothpaste. I've been doing that for years. Yeah. And, you know, I haven't really been ill. I've been very, very healthy. And it's a huge change to my 20s when I was on antibiotics and antidepressants for, well, pretty much until I was about 35. So it's like a decade of, you know, not having that. And it takes a long time for your body to clear. And I'm pretty sure I'm still not there, but.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's why people turn to pharma medicines and the quick fix solution a lot of the time, because people are so desperate. I mean, it's horrible when you feel awful. It's shit. You feel really bad. You can't function very well. And all of a sudden the doctor gives you a tablet and it feels like it's making a difference. So you think, okay, I feel better. But actually, if you came off that tablet, well, you might have to go on to higher doses, or you might have to go on other ones to complement it. And, you know, you get sucked down into this line. And when I wasn't at my best, and I was struggling a little bit, my gut health was terrible and my emotional balance wasn't very good. And my mood shifts were changing quite a lot. And I was very tearful all the time. And I felt like I was on edge and stressed all the time. And I could have gone to the doctors, and I think they would have put me on anti-anxiety and antidepressants and probably sleeping tablets. And that would have helped. I'm sure it would have helped, but it wouldn't have solved the underlying issues that I had, or tackling those things that I needed to really deal with. And I'm not in any way slagging off medical doctors, because most of them believe they're doing the best thing. And, you know, some do amazing work. But they do say that it takes 25 years for medicine to catch up with the science. And epigenetics is one of those areas where modern medicine hasn't really still caught up. And it hasn't really caught up about gut health either. Like they say everything starts in the gut. And, you know, it's probably true. Everything starts in the gut. Our gut is our second brain. It has more of a nervous system than our brain does. You know, our gut is very sensitive. And one of the main things that our body does is elimination. And we have to eliminate to be able to keep healthy. And people, you know, don't really consider gut health that much, but it makes such an impact to people. But just going back to epigenetics again. So in case anybody doesn't know that's listening, in the 90s, they did something called the Human Genome Project, which told us a lot more information about DNA than we thought. And they used to think that 95% of our DNA is junk. But actually, now they realize that that's not true. And those SNPs, they're called single nucleopolypeptides in our DNA. They can affect the way in which we express our messenger DNA, RNA, and how our proteins are then expressed. So, and we are proteins. So our epigenetics, which is that can be changed by our environment, is really important. So, for example, someone that's got a very strong history of hypothyroidism in their family probably have a genetic variation in their ancestral line that under certain conditions leads to hypothyroidism. And this, I have this in my family. My maternal side pretty much all have a problem with hypothyroidism. And all of it was precipitated by stress, mainly, like life stresses. And if, when they first started having symptoms, if they'd have been aware of how they could improve their levels of stress and clearing the products of stress and everything else, they might not have got to the point where their thyroid wasn't functioning, that they needed to have thyroid medication. So epigenetics is something that modern medicine doesn't really take into consideration. And there are a big percentage of the population that have something called an MTHFR variant. I don't know if you've heard of MTHFR.
Yeah, I have. Yes, I have. Don't they? My understanding is people with that variant don't do so very well with vaccination.
Yeah. Well, vaccinations and medication, like per se, really. But also the problem with MTHFR is that their methylation processes and detoxification processes aren't as good as they should be. And also they find it very difficult to methylate B vitamins in certain forms. So folic acid, for example, in someone with MTHFR is like a poison, which they're going to put in all the bread, in all the flour. So for 30 to 40% of the population, that could actually harm them more than it could ever benefit them. But those percentage of the population find it very difficult to detoxify, and they find it very difficult to maintain a level of B vitamins that's functional. And then they start getting, because B vitamins have loads of functions, especially for our nervous system. And the modern medicine just doesn't really look at that in any way. And if we knew who was MTHFR, if we knew who had that genetic variation, we could be very careful with certain drugs, or with, like you say, with vaccines, or with, and making sure that their detoxification pathways are good.
Yes. Excellent. I love that. That's helpful to know and hear. So what would you say is the best way to start when it comes to integrative health? Is it just to meet up with somebody and start having those conversations, or start eliminating, sorry, from the perspective that I come from, I really like, I really look at the spiritual reasons as well, which I know you do. And I always, I've had a lot of ill health, and I've learned that about 6 months before I got ill, in many respects, I was going through a bit of a thinking pattern, and I could trace things back. So for me, what I've done is kind of let go of some of my feelings, and then also done a detox at the same time, or started to do a detox. What kinds of things happen when people start consulting with you?
Okay, so I have a package which is based over 12 to 16 weeks. So it's 4 appointments, and in between you get a lot of guidance as well. But the first appointment is really it usually takes about 60 to 90 minutes, and it's just talking about your background and your initial problems, and the problems that are causing you the most concern, and the ones that you want to solve. So, and then the first thing that we can change, which is very easy, is diet. Well, I say it's easy. It's not always that easy, but it's diet. So what I usually say to people is some of the really simple things that you can start to do, and everybody can do this, is reduce the amount of caffeine that you drink. There are some schools of thought that say that caffeine per se is bad and that you shouldn't drink it every day. There are some people that say that 1 to 2 cups of coffee or tea are not going to do you much harm. If you are really kind of end stage adrenal fatigue, very highly stressed, caffeine is the worst thing that you can be drinking. So caffeine is like a big one that you can already start to reduce, but don't stop it straight away. Reduce it slowly. Sorry, can you hear my dogs?
That's great. That's normal in Portugal, isn't it? I have to say with caffeine, that's I've detoxed from a few things over my life, several times. And caffeine is one of the worst things for me to detox from. I end up having a headache for like a good couple of weeks.
Yeah, it's very difficult. That's why it's best to do it, especially if you have problems, is to do it slowly. But I mean, caffeine's not something that I have given up completely. I do still drink coffee and I do still occasionally drink tea, but I do try to go through long periods where I'm not drinking tea or coffee, just to give my body a rest. But in terms of coffee, the caffeine stimulates a stress response. So it will release adrenaline and noradrenaline and cortisol. And those things are the things that make you feel stressed. So although it might wake you up and make you more focused to be able to do something, in the longer term, it can mean that you have a lot more circulatory neurotransmitters and corticosteroids that you don't really want floating around your body all of the time. You want to clear. So caffeine, and I know lots of people are very attached to caffeine. In fact, I think most adults are, actually. There's not many adults that do without coffee or tea.
I just got into it again. I mean, I think it went for about 3 years without any caffeine, and then just in the last month started drinking caffeine again. And I know I'm ready to leave it again.
But did you start drinking it because you're starting to feel more tired and like you feel like you need it?
Yeah, because I was just at the end of my tether, going through another move, and just felt really, I don't know, in a moment of weakness. And I just thought, oh, I wonder what that caffeine might taste like. But I know I'm much better when I don't have any kind of stimulants. I function much better when I'm kind of clean of them. And every now and again I dabble, but then I think, oh, I know why I didn't have it now. But of course, in Portugal, it's quite hard, because probably a lot of the things that you would advise people don't have are freely abundant and shared here.
Sugar. Sugar. When I first came to Portugal and I went to the first children's party that I went to, I was horrified because in England, it was almost like a competition as who could provide the most healthiest
the virtuous
food.
party.
Yeah, virtuous party food. You always had to have wholemeal bread and fruit and stuff like that, and water. Like, God forbid you had
celery sticks.
10 cans of celery stick. No, the kids never touched it. And I came here and went to this first party, and the table was just full of dessert, full of sugar, sweets, everything. So the kids, obviously, they were with all the sugar that they could possibly get. And then about 2 hours later, the grandmother came out with soup. And she wanted the kids to eat soup. And they were like, what? We've just filled ourselves with 3,000 calories of sugar. I'm not going to eat your soup now. So, and there was no water. It was just all fizzy drinks. I was quite, and these were 4-year-old kids. So yes, Portugal has a big addiction to sugar. So after caffeine, sugar is the second thing that you should try and eliminate from your diet as much as possible because it is inflammatory, and processed, sugar. So anything that's got processed sugar in it really is not great for us. And if you really want to tackle your health and you have serious health underlying things, removing sugar and caffeine and also vegetable oils and sunflower oils are awful for inflammation. Just doing those 3 things will really help. Then what I usually do is we go on to like a 21-day diet, but it's not really a diet because we're not calorie counting for a start. And some people find that difficult to wrap their heads around because they just think that if they lose weight, they will feel better, but that's not necessarily the case. So I think people find it difficult in terms of like how much food they actually might eat. Because once you're eating whole foods, you can eat a lot more than if you're just eating processed foods all the time. So the 21-day kind of diet goes that is liquid before lunch. So usually it's a smoothie with protein and fat included as well. So we always include fat or protein with carbohydrates because it balances blood sugar and it stops the spikes and the highs and low in blood sugar, which also is impacted by caffeine as well. So liquid before lunch, and then lunch is usually can either be vegetarian with a light protein, like with fish or chicken or turkey breast. But most of your plate is vegetables, and most of it, mostly non-starchy vegetables. So salad, spinach, onions, garlic, those things. Starchy vegetables are more things like carrots, parsnips, potatoes. If you're trying to lose weight, less starchy carbohydrates are better. If just on a standard normal plate, the rule of thumb is if you have a quarter of your plate is protein, a quarter of your plate is starchy carbohydrates, and half of your plate is non-starchy carbohydrates, then you're on the right track. And then you can have a snack again in the afternoon, and then in the evening again it's a vegetarian or with a light protein. But for those 21 days, we remove eggs, dairy, wheat, and any inflammatory grains. So it's a pretty basic 21-day diet, but you can eat as much as you want on it. And then once you've done the 21 days, then we can start introducing foods back in again and see how you are affected by it. Because even if you don't have like an intolerance reaction, you could still be having an intolerance to those things, and it might just make you feel really tired, for example. Like you might not get diarrhea or hives or an allergic response, but you just might be feeling not great. And your body's not fully processing those foods very well. So the 21 days, it does two things really, or more than two things, but it balances people's blood sugar, which is really important, because if your blood sugar is spiking all the time, you're releasing adrenaline and noradrenaline, which is your stress hormones. You also release cortisol, which can mean that you lay down more fat, especially around the middle. And you'll just feel stressed out, really. So it gives the digestive system a rest, it balances the blood sugar, and then it gives us an opportunity to reintroduce foods and to see which ones may be ones that you should avoid. Most people aren't actually allergic to gluten, but because their gut is leaky for various reasons, then it can cause problems with proteins entering the bloodstream, and then you get like a response. But you're not technically allergic to the gluten, you're allergic to the proteins, or sometimes it's the glyphosate. Yeah, exactly, which open up the junctions in the gut. So the other thing we also do is we look at digestion, and we've forgotten about good digestion. My grandmother used to always say, chew your food 100 times. So I also remember it's really hard to chew your food 100 times.
It really is, yeah.
But, one of the things we do is teach people about digestion. So number one thing is chew your food properly. Because when we chew our food, it releases saliva, which stimulates hydrochloric acid in your stomach, which means that you have the right levels for when you eat the food for them to start digestion. And if you have low hydrochloric acid in your stomach, the knock-on effects of that can be huge, because you're not digesting your food properly. So it enters the small intestine in an undigested state, and then your gut bacteria can't work on it as well, and you get a putrefaction in your gut, and then that's when people got a lot of gas symptoms and things like that, and bloating. It's usually because there's an imbalance of gut bacteria, or you haven't got the right enzymes that are breaking down the food. So what we do if I suspect that they might be a low or high stomach acid is that we can do a very easy test with bicarbonate. I don't know if you've heard of this test, but you can use bicarbonate of soda. You put 1 teaspoon in water, you drink and then depending on how quickly you burp, depends on how much stomach acid you may or might not have.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I actually quite like having a little bit of bicarb in water.
Yeah.
Which way round is it? Like,
if you don't burp, your stomach acid is very low, and if you burp straight away, then you've probably got high active stomach acid.
Oh, right.
So what that's quite useful for is that people, and I suffered this myself. So I started to get reflux burning symptoms in my chest and my esophagus, and I was also getting a lot of trapped wind, to the point where sometimes I had to be winded like a baby.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And anyway, I went for an endoscopy, and they had a look down, and I had severe esophagitis. My whole esophagus was red, and that's quite dangerous because it can lead to cancerous changes. So the doctor put me on, this was quite a long time ago, the doctor put me on omeprazole, which is a proton pump inhibitor, so it keeps your stomach acid low. But the problem wasn't that I had high stomach acid. The problem was I had a hiatus hernia, which is where the stomach pushes up through the diaphragm, and it pushes the acid that you've got there up. So really all I needed to do, which I then did later on, was change my diet and lifestyle. And I was drinking too much red wine. I was drinking quite a lot of tea and coffee, and I wasn't exercising very much, and I wasn't eating particularly well. And I don't know if you've heard of the Body Coach, but this was quite a few years. This was like 7 years ago or 8 years ago now. I did the Body Coach. It's Joe Wicks, the Body Coach. And it's a lot of exercise and it's timed carbohydrates. And I was able to come off the omeprazole and never went back on it again. So lots of people think they have high acid. They get given omeprazole or they take antacids from the pharmacy. But what they're doing is they're not solving the underlying problem. And it might be that they actually have low acid, but they just have it in the wrong place.
Yeah.
So lower digestive symptoms usually are you might have low stomach acid, or you might not have enough enzymes to break down the food in the first place, or you could have an imbalance of gut microbiome. And part of the functional medicine part of Integrative Health is looking at labs to try and understand where your issue lies so that you can deal with that. And I since found out later that the omeprazole caused me all sorts of problems with my gut. And what I had was an overgrowth. I had a small intestine bacterial overgrowth and a small intestine fungal overgrowth. And I only knew that from testing. So, testing's not cheap, and not everybody wants to test, and you don't have to test. But I'd say if you've been having health challenges for a long time and you're not improving, then testing might be actually more cost efficient, because people spend a lot of money on different supplements, on different modalities of treatment, but they don't ever get to the root cause. So digestion is a massive one. Some easy things that people can do for digestion is 5 milliliters of apple cider vinegar in 30 milliliters of water with every meal. And some people get really good results just from doing that with every meal. And it's especially important for women over a certain age, because when we start to hit 40, our stomach acid production does start to reduce, and especially when we're super stressed, or maybe you might be on different hormone replacement and things like that. So women especially have problems with low stomach acid, but men do too. But women over a certain age, probably over the age of 40, 45, cider vinegar for everybody probably would be a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, I actually swear by the stuff. I mean, I really love it, especially like, for instance, if one of us in our family gets a snuffle or a sore throat, or like if we get congested in our nose, a little bit of apple cider vinegar in a glass of water, it unblocks your nose really rapidly. Again and again and again, it always just clears it. It's perfect.
Yeah, taste minging those.
I love it.
I do. I don't like.
Yeah, we've got some comments from people in the Fiona and Simon had already shared this. Yeah, use vinegar for all sorts of things. They've also added on passing on good genomics is important for our children. Carl has said cracking lunch yesterday then. Yeah, he did a plate of vegetables and steamed broccoli and fresh salad. I went sauteed mushrooms, and it just everything we picked up from the market, which was very nice. That's one of the things I like about Portugal, actually. Taking care of ourselves today for the benefit of future generations. Yeah, and I think we can do that emotionally as well, can't we? I really do think, what's the word? There's something I say, the buck stops here with me. I really want to heal myself, and anything that might be contributing to ill health or dis-ease, like emotional, spiritual dis-ease, so that my children don't pick up on it. Like Carl saying, it's not the trap stuff you need to worry about. I think he's talking about wind there. I found a handful of nuts at night can help you in a morning.
Yeah, one of the other things that the Integrative Health looks at is a period of fasting, and during that 21 days, like detox, the recommendation is that you try and fast for at least 12 hours. it's probably more beneficial if you fast for 16, and occasionally, like every few weeks, do 24-hour fasts, or some people even do longer fasts. I haven't managed to fast longer than 24 hours. I just can't do it yet. But I think my blood sugar still is a little bit up and down, and I still haven't quite reached that point.
Is that to start off? Is it called autophagy? You know, where I was investigating.
Yeah.
I was looking at it before I got pregnant with my third child, and I'd got myself into a place where I was having 16-hour fasts, or just eating between about 4 hours during the day, and I was feeling really great actually. And then I got pregnant, and then I had to stop that experiment straight away. It didn't feel
the theory behind that is that if your body isn't digesting, it's in a rest and relax phase because it's not digesting food all the time, and it's not constantly being bombarded with things that your body's having to deal with. But also, like you say, that the body starts to turn to look for other things to eat. So you have like an autophagy response. And the way I was taught that was like, it's like a Pac-Man. It's going around your body, just scoffing up all the bits that shouldn't be there.
Yeah. And doesn't it promote like it doesn't my understanding is that it gets rid of damaged cells so that you're not reproduced, like when your cells is it replicate or duplicate? You're taking out the bad codes.
Exactly.
And then actually starting to refresh your system with new fresh stuff. Because do you create new cells then, like brand new cells that are completely free?
Well, we're always regenerating cells all the time. So if you can, like you say, if you can remove those ones that are coded wrong because they've been interfered with for whatever reason, then the next cell regeneration in that cycle will regenerate in the way that it should. Which is why, you know, it is entirely possible to heal from many different conditions. And, you know, there's nothing worse as a patient of being told that your condition is life-limiting or is terminal, because, you know, the biology of belief. I know that I've seen you mention Bruce Lipton before. He's one of my heroes. I absolutely love him. I would love to have dinner with him. But when he talks about the placebo effect and the biology of belief, I think he's absolutely right. If you're told that you've only got 5 years to live, then you're going to live like you've only got 5 years to live. But if you're told that actually there's a potential that if you change things, you could really extend your lifespan, then people are much more positive. You know, the nocebo has just as much effect as the placebo.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that's what we're not very good at in modern medicine, is encouraging people and empowering people to tell them that they can indeed heal. And, you know,
they can turn it around.
They can turn it around, absolutely. But people were not told that. They're just told to be on this pill for the rest of your life, or that, you know, that you're going to be limited. But there's lots of things that we can do, obviously, in terms of mitigating the impact of our environment on health. We can't completely change things. But I do know that from my own personal experience, getting on top of my stress levels and my triggers, because I didn't even realize that I had triggers until I realized I did. And then they're everywhere. But working on that definitely helps. So in terms of integrative health, the first thing we really look at is diet and digestion. And then we look at, they call it the de-stress protocol. So it's diet and digestion, then it's emotional balance, stress. We look at toxins, we look at the importance of rest and re-establishing your circadian rhythm. Where did I get to? Rest. Exercise, supplementation, so what supplements we can use. And he says Stephen Cabral has the final S as success mindset, but I've changed it to spirituality, because I think I think it's much more important that we all, you know, link into that a little bit, because I think as humans, we've forgotten who we are and how powerful we are, and actually how capable we are as well. So I think the spirituality kind of links in with that too.
Yeah, we've got a couple of extra comments here. So Fiona and Simon are saying, I usually fast when I've been ill and use the time recovering to detox and restart back on fruit and salads and electrolytes.
Yeah.
That sounds like a very gentle approach, because a lot of people
Yeah.
scarf down a McDonald's, don't they, when they
Yeah, no, don't do that.
and Carl's saying it's been a while. I think he's referring to the fact that it's been a while since our son was born, so I could actually go back and start getting onto my fasting again.
We'll start with 12 hours.
Yeah.
12 hours is doable, really, isn't it?
It's actually quite easy to do if you're quite a busy person, or
Yeah.
if you structure your time. It's not that difficult, is it? I'd like to ask you, if I may, because you're talking about stress and that a lot of things seem to come from stress. What do you make of what's going on in the world right now? With like the fear. I know it's a big sort of question, but from your training as obviously somebody who was in medicine for years and years and years, and also working with intensive care nursing and high dependency units and whatnot. How do you unpick what's going on right now? First of all, with mandatory vaccines and with this like virus that you can be ill even if you're not showing symptoms. And
yeah, I mean, I think I have a theory that they want to keep us in fear, and they want to keep us sick and blocked. So on my website, I've written some stuff about, the chakra philosophy and balancing all your energy centers and everything. And I am absolutely of the belief that we hold energy in certain places, and that's where our disease arises a lot of the time.
Yeah.
And unblocking that energy and allowing the energy to flow allows us the healing conditions that we should put our body under, really, because but it's very difficult because people's self-esteem is very low generally in the population, I think. And I think, this is like a 10-hour conversation, but I think people have forgotten who we are as humans. I think we've forgotten how to interact in a community, and I think we've forgotten how important a lot of things are. I think we've been driven into this matrix society of you have to go to school, you have to get a job, you work from 9 to 5, or longer hours, then you buy a house, then you're a slave to a mortgage, then and that is like how our society tells us that we should function. And if you're doing anything outside of that, you're either a weirdo or or that you're not included in the society.
Yeah.
Society.
A weirdo.
Yeah, me too. But I think that we are ascending as a human race. I think that there has been times along our history where we've made big leaps in our consciousness, and we've made big advancements. And I think that, as you obviously know, astrologically, this is in the stars, that we are shifting into a new paradigm and things are changing. And I think the people that control us, the 1%, I think they know that. And I think they want to try and keep us vibrating low and in fear, so that we're not able to reach that level of consciousness that maybe some of us already have. Do you understand what I mean?
Yeah, completely.
And, the media has a lot to answer for. Social media has a lot to answer for. Our governments and bodies and everything else, they are all spouting the same narrative. And, I have no doubt that people have died of COVID-19, whatever caused those symptoms, they've, from that collection of symptoms, I have no doubt that they've died. I've spoken to friends that still work in intensive care. They've had some very sick young patients in, like we kind of do a lot of winters. Swine flu winter was like that too. And obviously someone's capitalizing from it, but it's not us. We're not capitalizing from it. And the whole mandatory vaccine thing, or the push for mandatory vaccines, I think it's just a way to get people to accept ongoing mandatory vaccines. So if they make this one mandatory for everybody, which I don't actually think they will be able to do because of law, but what they're doing is, yeah, exactly. What they're doing is they're making it a requirement of like employment or travel and things like that. And in my opinion, that's a coercive element. It means that you don't give free, informed, voluntary consent.
You can't earn a living.
Yeah. Exactly. And I know people that have taken the vaccine either because they need to be able to travel to a certain country, or to go on a specific course, or to keep their job. And that's totally wrong. And also, there's been a lot of dishonesty from the top down, and you only have to dig into the figures and some of the research and the medical journals and things like that to understand that, first of all, cures and treatments are being withheld. There are available very effective treatments. I mean, even just vitamin D is probably the most important factor in terms of severity of illness. And Matt Hancock stood up in the Houses of Parliament and said there was no evidence for that, but there is loads of evidence, and there was already evidence before COVID came that those with low vitamin D levels don't do well in like flu season, for example. So, but instead of like giving us information that could make us empowered and not be in fear, they've just continued to push the fear narrative. And the end goal, when you look at the Agenda 21 and Agenda 30 and things like that, the end goal is to have us all connected to the Internet of Things. And the vaccine passport's part of that, So as far as I'm concerned, if people want to take the vaccine, they absolutely should, if they want to. But we should have a balanced playing field, a level playing field. We should have all the information, and it should be widely available. And anybody that's disagreeing with what people are saying, they shouldn't be being censored. They shouldn't be being discredited and shamed. And I've heard of some very good doctors being struck off the GMC for speaking out. I know nurses that have been removed from the nursing register for speaking out, and it's a bit like a witch hunt, actually, a bit like a modern day witch hunt. But I do feel that there is a resistance, and that resistance is actually quite strong. And I also think that now, like even in those that have been double vaccinated, now they're being told that they're going to have 6 monthly boosters. At some point they're going to say, what are we doing? And they've played a very slick trick. And at the beginning, I will admit that at the beginning, I was a little bit worried because I'd watched Event 201 already. So I kind of thought, well, this is coming. Like, obviously they know it's coming. And then when I heard that this about Wuhan, and then you saw all the footage of them dropping dead and stuff like that. And then I was looking at some of the medical journals and the figures, and I was thinking, whoa, this mortality rate is really high, and a lot of people need to go to intensive care. And I thought, well, within a few weeks, we're going to be overrun, and there'll be, because intensive care doesn't have that much flexibility anyway. It's a resource that's almost always to capacity. And then it didn't happen. And then that didn't quite happen like they said it was going to happen. And there were some peaks in intensive care. You can see that in the data. But it wasn't consistent, and they did cope and they did manage, and they didn't really use the Nightingale hospitals and things like that. So there's been a lot of misinformation on all sides. In my opinion.
I definitely recognise that there's been some misinformation to try and get people to go anti-vaccination, but with really dodgy information, so that gets spread, and then everyone goes, that's rubbish, you shouldn't listen to that. It's like there's
well, I mean, I think that's deliberate, like you say,
right?
Because actually you don't really need to be posting any crazy conspiracy theories about anything. You don't have to. It's just on the very basic facts alone. Point one, the trials haven't finished. Just at one point, you don't have to be an anti-vaxxer to say, well, actually, I don't want the vaccine until the trials have finished and I've seen all the data. And at the moment, people aren't getting any data. We're still being told it's 95% effective, and it's nowhere near that now.
One thing that puzzles me is where's the control group? Because normally when tests are done, like scientific tests, presumably this is a scientific trial, where's the control group? Who are the control group?
I think we're the control group. No, I know what you mean in the trials.
Well, no, not, I mean, like if people being vaccinated right now are part of a live ongoing test, how are the control group being observed?
Well, I think, in the original trials,
I know. Sorry to interrupt. I know, when people talk about like early childhood vaccinations and things, and they say, yes, there's definitely data to suggest that people are safer when they have their early vaccinations, their childhood vaccinations. And then when some clever dick says, Oh, really? Where's the data that you've compared a vaccinated group against an unvaccinated? There's no studies to actually.
There is one.
Is there? Ooh.
There was one and I got barred from Facebook for posting this. There was one study which showed that in terms of autoimmune issues in kids and hospital visits and GP visits, the unvaccinated group fared much better than the vaccinated, and there was much more allergies and everything else. I mean, obviously, the scope of that research needs to be looked at with other factors, but that's the whole thing of the vaccine industry, actually, is that the way in which they test is very heavily biased in support of what they're saying their vaccines do.
Don't they put the adjuvants in the like you've got the real thing, and then the other thing should be saline that you're testing against. Don't adjuvants go in the saline solution?
They shouldn't.
No, I read somewhere that they did.
Oh, I don't know about that, but
they have the
like,
same,
for example, true. Actually, they should do, and the adjuvants haven't been individually assessed for safety either, and they haven't been assessed in terms of cumulative doses either. So there's a heavy amount of bias in the vaccine trials per se. But if you look at this one, it's kind of exposed it, actually, because let's take the Pfizer, for example. They had like 25,000 people in each arm. They had the vaccine arm, and then they had the placebo, which was, I think it was saline in the Pfizer, but actually another one of the trials used a meningitis vaccine as their placebo, which is crazy.
Why would they do that? I mean,
they said that if they give people saline, that they'll know that they haven't been given the injection because it won't hurt, so that it will skew the bias. So they gave another vaccine so that it might hurt their arm, and then they wouldn't know which way. I know, it's crazy, isn't it? This is the science. This is the pseudoscience.
There's nothing scientific about that.
No. And what they did was they followed the group 28 days post second dose, and then they're supposed to follow them up for 2 years. But because of ethical concerns, they've unblinded the placebo so that they know whether they got it or not, so that they could then take the vaccine if they wanted it. So they've already skewed the long-term safety data by unblinding.
Presumably a load of those people that found out they were given the placebo then went out and got the jab.
Yeah, and there is a placebo group, because there's a group that hasn't been vaccinated. Obviously, there's a group of individuals that haven't been vaccinated, and it does look like now at the moment there are more vaccinated in hospital than unvaccinated, and more vaccinated are dying than unvaccinated. But obviously, more percentage of the population is vaccinated, so you have to take that into consideration. But I think, like I said, if people want to get vaccinated, if they do the research and they're acting voluntary, that's entirely up to them.
Yeah.
And they should take that based upon their own individual risk. But it's not a level playing field, and that's the problem.
Yes, I got very angry when my parents were vaccinated because they weren't told they were in a test. They absolutely weren't told that they were in a test, and that test was ongoing until 2023. And I think that's actually quite critical information. Absolutely, because also it's contrary to the Nuremberg Code, because if people are indeed, and they are, if you think about it, when they did the original trials, they had 28 days in between the doses. And then all of a sudden they said that they were going to extend that to, was it 12 weeks, I think, at one point. And then they shortened it again, and then they lengthened it again. And now they're giving the third dose as well as an influenza vaccine at the same time, which hasn't been tried. I actually know somebody who had who this year, and this is somebody in their 80s, in the UK, has had two doses of the the vax right now, the main one, and then just recently had a booster and the flu jab on the same day. And I was trying to find out, have you ever actually had 3 untested and a flu in the same year? I haven't got a response yet, but that to me doesn't sound very responsible. Like not on the person electing for it, but the advice that that's what should be happening.
No, not when there's a grave concern about antibody-dependent enhancement as well. And there is clear evidence that after the vaccine, the mRNA vaccine, is that your immune system takes a big hit in the first 2 weeks. So if you're exposing people to, and it's potentially why so many people have had this super cold that they're talking about in the UK, could be partly due to that. And that people's immune systems have really taken a hit. But, time's going to tell on that. And I know quite a lot of people that have been vaccinated and not had any problems as yet. And I hope that remains the case. I hope that, they're not going to have any problems going forward. But the best thing that people can do going into winter is ensure their vitamin D levels are topped up. And when we talk in terms of functional health, we talk of levels over 70. Anything up to 100 is safe, but they say anything over 20 is an adequate level. So people really need to look at supplementation with vitamin D. And anybody that lives north of 35 degrees latitude, they don't synthesize any vitamin D in the winter. So if you're not getting it from food sources, which we don't get that much from food sources, you're not getting any. So unless you've topped up yourself and been in the sun all summer and you have a good supply, because it is stored, vitamin D can be stored, which...
How long does it get stored for?
It's not very long. I think it's about 3 months, I think. But if you top it up, obviously. But people can safely take 4,000 units of vitamin D3 a day. There is suggestion that if you take it with K2 as well, it also helps. And you also should have adequate levels of magnesium for D3 to work effectively. So, people take tiny doses. The vitamin D that you can buy in Holland and Barrett usually is probably 400 international units, when you actually probably need more like 4,000.
Yeah.
So the 400 is based upon your recommended daily allowance to not develop rickets.
Yeah.
So all of the RDAs of vitamins and minerals are your recommended daily allowance is to prevent the disease that happens if you have that deficiency. So functional medicine looks at a lot higher doses of supplements, but is guided by testing usually.
Yeah, because it wants you to have a good life, not just a substandard life.
And in Portugal, many people don't know this, but in Portugal, you can just go to a lab and you can order a vitamin D test yourself. You don't have to go to the doctors to get it done. And in the UK, there are quite a few sites that you can get one posted to you and then it gets sent out to a lab. And I would advise anybody that is taking higher doses of vitamin D that they should get their vitamin D level checked, just so they know where their target range is, because it can be toxic if you're taking too high doses. But really, you're only going to get into toxic doses if you're taking more than 10,000 units a day. And then you need to be, when you're taking much higher doses, that's when you need to be careful with your calcium intake, because it can cause problems with calcium deposits. But the general rule of thumb is 4,000 units is safe for everybody to take. And, we live indoors now pretty much. Well, not everybody, but as a society.
Yeah.
And then they locked us down, So for any protection going forward, whether you're vaccinated or not vaccinated, vitamin D is your friend.
And a bit of fresh air.
Fresh air and sunshine still, because it's still good. Even if you're not utilising vitamin D, it's still good for us.
Yeah. We've got a few more comments coming in, mainly from Fiona and Simon. This is right up their street. So they've shared with us, people think I'm being funny because I don't let our daughters have cans of fizzy pop and bags of sweets. And a tablet to stare at, but it's our choice. And I see the difference in her behavior when she's become erratic, emotional, and has had a lack of interaction. Agree, Jenny. Vitamin D and foods high in zinc also. I believe the answers are all around us in nature by eating a natural and in-season diet, like fruits, sweet chestnuts, mushrooms at the moment. In fact, that's something that I really ask myself quite a lot is, what do other mammals do? I really kind of, I don't study them, but I'm fascinated by how other mammals raise their young, how they sleep, how they do things, on a day-to-day level. Like, for instance, mammals all sleep together in little packs until they don't. And that's something that you see, like when I lived in Indonesia, I saw that all the families all slept in one room together. And of course, in UK, US, Canada, Australia, and now most of Europe, people sleep apart right from word go. You know, you have to wonder about the kind of spiritual, psychic things that go on there as well. But yeah. And the great thing about being in Portugal, and this is the thing that our kids love the most, in particular our eldest, who remembers vaguely being in the UK, is that fruits taste so beautiful out here. And we have so many. I mean, there's so many beautiful fruits out here. It's amazing. So I think there's another few comments. We have a natural immunity. Quick, put a patent on it. I love that comment. Haha, no sun now in the UK till next May if we're lucky. And we've got Thunderduck, who was actually originally from the US and is now living in Portugal. Good afternoon. I'm just translating that one. Hi, Jenny and Mrs. M. What foods are high in zinc?
Well, nuts, seeds are high in zinc, but and certain grains are quite high in zinc as well. Seafood has zinc and selenium, which is very good. Selenium is very good for the thyroid too. So it's just a wide variety of foods, really. And you should get enough zinc from your diet, unless you've got digestive problems. Yeah. But you should get enough zinc from your diet. But you know, the protocols that are going around at the moment, you see a lot of our vitamin D, zinc, vitamin C, quercetin, which is a zinc ionophore, which helps get the zinc inside the cells. And those four, and omega-3s, and also probiotics, because a lot of patients that ended up in intensive care didn't have very good gut health.
So I mean, you know, I've heard that as well, you know, that a lot of the people that end up very poorly are ones with very sort of like maybe malfunctioning immunity. You know, they're just not that strong. Yeah. Right? So anything we can do to just strengthen ourselves is the best way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think stress has a lot to do with that, and fear. Like when we're living in fear and we're vibrating low, we're not giving our immune system the best chance, really. So it's really important that meditation, grounding I have to do a lot of. I'm very sensitive to energies. I feel very I'm a bit electrosensitive. And I really started to understand grounding a few years ago, when I realized how much better I felt when I was just in bare feet all the time. And my partner's a surfer, and he pretty much all through summer he's always in bare feet, and he's one of the grounded people I know. He hardly ever wears shoes. He goes into shops and
seriously, wow.
Awesome. People look at him like crazy one.
I swear to God, my kids would do that given half the chance. It's wonderful. I actually really like to be barefoot as well. It's definitely worth. It's the way forward from my perspective. Any final comments then about health or surviving the onslaught of what we're going through right now? You know, what advice would you give people who are worried? I mean, like one of the things I have been thinking for a long time is that we're living in times where we need to be really happy where we are. That it might be time not to travel, and it might be time to just make peace with where you are right now and just sit back and observe what's going on. Because, you know, I've heard of, like, you know, people, you know, there's a lot of stuff going on in the airlines at the moment. There's a lot of police, soldiers across the board, you know, coming out of service because they're being let go of. Same with nurses. In France as well, there were a few hospitals shut down, I believe, because they all went on strike in solidarity. Feels to me like it's time to sit back and watch and observe. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think the things are constantly changing, aren't they? And we're in this constant state of flux. It's very hard to get a center and to be grounded. But I think for me, the most important thing is being around like-minded people and trying to build a little bit of a community where we are. Just as a backup plan, really. And also, I'm trying to be proactive by removing myself as much from this societal matrix that they've imposed on us, and trying to be more self-sufficient and just taking action into our own hands. I mean,
Oh no!
Did I go offline then?
You did a little bit. Thankfully it stopped, and you weren't going like that.
But also, I think meditation is very, very important. And it was something that up until a few years ago, I always said, I can't meditate. I remember a spiritual friend said to me, Jenny, have you tried meditating? And I'm like, I can't meditate. And she was like, that's the point, Jenny. You have to learn to meditate. So I listen to a lot of binaural beats. They help me shut off, turn off the news because... and come away, have breaks from social media, because what I find now is that I've got this like battle going on with my friends. Like I see it on Facebook. I've stepped right back from Facebook now. I spent 2 years trying to alert people to what was going on and stuff like that, and it just became really demoralizing, and I just stepped away from Facebook. But I go on there now and I see two very polar opposite views, and it's like they've got us fighting with each other. But essentially, I don't think it matters what your views are, whether you're terrified of the virus or not, whether you're whether you're pro-vaccination or not. I think, what we have to look at now is what's happening with our freedoms, what's coming in the future, and how can we try and not join that consensus, because as soon as there is a consensus on something, that will become a reality. So I think we have to resist what we don't agree with, and we have to be brave. And I think that we just have to keep pushing on, but to try and reduce the subconscious fears that we have, and being in our lizard brain all the time, our amygdala, living in that fear. And I mean, I'm very sad at how people have been terrified. Louisa. Like I find it very sad when I see people still wearing gloves and 2 face masks to go out, 18 months down the line, when, it hasn't quite evolved like they said it was going to, and people are still very afraid. And I find people are very short fused at the moment. Like almost every time I go out, I'm almost in a confrontation with somebody when I don't want to be. Do you know what I mean? Because people seem really angry right now. And I understand we're going through a big shift and a big change. And I hope in the end it's going to come out positively. But that depends on us, really, doesn't it? All of us. And I do sense that people are awakening more and more. I think there's been waves. I think there's been waves of awakening, and things have triggered people into thinking, hang on a minute, that doesn't sound right to me. And they start questioning what's going on. And I do think that there's been people that have been alerted to this, in advance, and some people many years in advance. Some people have always been awake, and that those people are here to guide other people through. And I think that we have to be kind. Like we can't be upset with people's choices. We can't, we have to just be kind and understand that everybody has their own preconceived formed ideas that they've had through their life and ancestry, I suppose. It goes all the way back, doesn't it? And understand that not everybody is equipped to think of things in the same way that maybe we can be. But I think there's a revolution coming.
Wow.
And I'm quite looking forward to it. Well, I think it's going to be bumpy, but
like most things are.
Yeah, exactly.
Calls into action. I loved what you said. We need to be brave, and of course, what we both know, and pretty much everyone that's watching this will also probably know this as well. Nobody can be brave when they're really under par with their health, and when they're emotionally stressed. Stress kills brave, like courage, doesn't it? Like people feel courage when they feel alive and vital and strong. Okay, I totally hear you. I think that's great. We've got 2 final comments, or actually 3. My husband's posted the same one twice, but I'll share it. He said, "This has been great. Thanks, Jenny. The school is blessed."
Likewise.
And also from Darren saying, "Thank you both. Great presentation. Fascinating stuff." So I think, and also from Fiona and Simon, important to talk and communicate with the ones around us. Yes, really good advice as well. So I think we should draw this to a close. And if anyone
talk for hours.
Oh, definitely. If anyone that is watching in live or later on, in Watch Again, if you'd like to see more from Jenny, or if you've got any questions for her, then just please do send them through. You can reach me, it's Louisa@feelgoodastrology.com. What's your email address? Are you happy to receive emails from people or communicate?
Yes, it's www.jennieasea, so ASEA, which is also something I'd love to talk to you about,
Okay.
at gmail.com. But I can write it on somewhere.
Hang on, let me just write it down here in the chat room and I'll post it live. So it's www.ge, in fact, JE.
I'll do it.
I've got your website here. Why don't I just post that to the stream? So under contact me, is that where I go?
Yeah, there's a page and I think my email address is there. Yeah.
Okay, let me just copy that. And Jenny's got a lovely website, by the way. It's genius.life. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm just posting the email address now. It's going to come up 5 or 6 times, I think. Yeah, from all the different aliases that this has gone out to today. Yeah, so thank you so much for coming in today, Jenny, especially given that we had a bit of, no
worries. Mercury.
Yes, well, Mercury is now direct.
Oh, yay!
We've weathered that storm. That's the end of Mercury retrograde for 2021 now. So anyway, thank you for joining us wherever you've joined us in the world. We love you all and we'll see you all soon. Bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jenny.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.